And if you doubt how serious the opposition is to the public, not just to Trump, but to the majority of the country that voted for Trump, they're trying to leave him with World War III on the way out.
Yep.
I can't imagine a more desperate or evil thing for Tony Blinken, who I think is desperate and evil, in my view, to do. Leave him with a war? A lame duck president trying to start a war with the world's largest nuclear power, Russia. What do you make of that?
It's incredibly insidious. And then add to the fact that he can't put two sentences together and he's largely not in control of his own government. And so you have almost an unelected president with individuals behind the scenes that are doing this. It doesn't surprise me, though. I mean, these are the same people that have weaponized the Department of Justice, have the lawfare. I have a colleague of mine, Jeff Clark, who's, they're trying to disbar him because of the care that he had on behalf of the president to deal with voter integrity and election fraud after 2020. And so the system has thrown everything at the warriors that are on the field. You're seeing that with Tulsi. You're seeing that with Matt Gaetz. I mean, why is all of this stuff being thrown at him slanderously?
Can I just say, I thought, I'm sorry to digress, but since you mentioned Gaetz, we don't accuse, look, DOJ leaked that he was a child sex trafficker, okay? So at that point, they have a moral, I would say, legal obligation to charge him for child sex trafficking and prove it in court. And if they can't, shut the F up. But they didn't do that.
They did not.
They leaked that Matt Gaetz, a guy they didn't like, whose views were a threat to them, is a child sex trafficker. Then they just let it hang in the air, and all their repulsive little minions like Joe Scarborough, like, he's a child sex trafficker. Really? You want to live in a world where the secret police can just slander you through the media? Like,
I read in my Bible this morning that you don't believe something unless 2 or 3 people are witnesses and say, and there is none of that. In fact,
that's Mosaic law right there.
In fact, the weaponized Department of Justice said we don't have the proof to pursue these allegations.
I know.
And so then you read in the story.
But they accused him of it.
They accuse it. They make the case. The reporter read it this morning. And then they say it should be known that Matt Gaetz denies that these allegations has occurred. Of course he denies it because they're not true in the Department of Justice. There's no accounting of the fact that these things have been proven not to be true. And yet people, and there's a tendency on our side, and this is very troubling. It's not just the left, which is kind of state regime propaganda. There's a tendency on our side to believe that if there's smoke, there must be fire. Why do we do that? Why does Republican congressmen, Republican senators believe that where there must be smoke, there must be fire, only because this person has been a confrontational, courageous, convictional leader and a true generational talent, I might add. So what the last point is indisputable. That's just a fact. I mean, Gaetz is the most articulate member of Congress. It's like, no, it's not even close. Right, so they hate him for that because he's a danger. My explanation, of course, I've noticed that Republicans believe most of what they're told. Part of it is, I think there's an IQ gap, if I'm just being honest. Part of it is they believe in the system, and Democrats just don't believe in the system at all. They don't believe in any system that curtails their power, basically. But Republicans really believe in it, to their great credit. And so they're like, well, it's the DOJ. I mean, it's kind of corrupt on the margins. You know what I mean? There's some bad apples, but most of them are really great. Really? Why haven't the great ones resigned? Right.
I don't think there's any evidence they're mostly great at all. I think they're really dangerous, heavily armed. Maybe that's the answer?
I think that is fundamental. It's twofold. I think the left is made up of revolutionaries.
For sure.
Right. And they're Marxist. If you've read Witness, everyone knows that, right? Like that's not a new phenomena. It's become militarized over and over.
Witness was written in like 1955.
So correct. Yes, right. So now what that looks like is not someone who's like a behind the scenes spy. Now that looks like some of their members of Congress, right? Like an AOC. They're Marxist revolutionaries are voting in Congress. So that's their side, and our side doesn't really grapple with that. We don't make every decision realizing like that's what they think and that's what they're doing. So I'm not going to listen to what they just kind of chit-chat conversation. I'm going to govern and make decisions based on what I know they are pursuing. Know your enemy. Secondly, we do have trust in kind of the media and the institutions. Like Tony Fauci can't be lying, right? He must not have been doing gain of function research if he said he wasn't. He's Tony Fauci, right? Like that's what we were up against, and
It's totally true.
And that is the wrong approach. You got to have a skepticism of all of these people and their institutions and their bureaucracies.
For 35 years, Liberty Safe has been the #1 manufacturer of safes made in this country, American made, from start to finish. They make high-quality gun safes. I've got one. Vault doors, home safes, handgun vaults, whatever you need to protect the things you value. And again, I can tell you from personal experience, these guys know what they're doing. I use Liberty Safes for the things that I don't want stolen, the things that really matter. My father's shotguns, the documents that I've got to have, and a lot more. I'm not going to tell you what else, but you need one. Crime rates are way up, and if you have anything you would like to protect that you need to protect, Liberty Safes is the way to do it. Now, Liberty Safe has over 350 dealers nationwide who specialize in delivery and installation and answering any questions you have. If you've got something to protect, they've got a way to protect it. Visit libertysafe.com, pick out what you need, and be sure to use the code Tucker at checkout to let them know that we sent you. They'll take care of the rest. Liberty Safe is a product we fervently believe in. With Liberty Safe, you are always protected. Okay. What needs to be done? And I'll shut up. I'll stop with my stupid editorial comments. You just go through the top 3 or 4 things that you think this incoming administration, which has a rare mandate, should achieve in order.
I believe that there's a lot of policy issues downstream, the border, inflation, wars across the world. All of them are downstream of one reality, and that is the American people currently are not in control of their government, and the president hasn't been either. And
That's correct, man.
We have to solve that. We have to solve the woke and the weaponized bureaucracy and have the president take control of the executive branch. So my belief, for anyone who wants to listen, is that the president has to move executively as fast and as aggressively as possible with a radical constitutional perspective to be able to dismantle that bureaucracy and their power centers. And I think there are a couple of ways to do it. Number one is going after the whole notion of independence. There are no independent agencies. Congress may have viewed them as such, SEC or the FCC, CFPB, the whole alphabet soup. But that is not something that the Constitution understands. So there may be different strategies with each one of them about how you dismantle them, but as an administration, the whole notion of an independent agency should be thrown out, particularly with the Department of Justice, in which there's literally no law. All it is precedent from the Watergate era that the Attorney General and those lawyers don't work for the president. And
who do they work for?
They think that they work for themselves. They think that they are.
So they have the power to kill people just because they awarded themselves that power? They have the power to kill people. I mean,
they believe that they have the power for all of the prosecutions, and that the president doesn't get a say in any of that. And we have to go at that as hard as we possibly can, whether that's the military. We have a whole military industrial complex of generals, and Tommy Tuberville kind of exposed this last year with a fight about life, but it really became a fight about whether we have essentially a military that is not subject to civilian leadership. So you can apply the concept of destroying independence at every agency. I even saw it in aspects of OMB with regard to who gets to make the decisions on statistics, right? Like there are little pockets of independence that have to be we got to remove those, right? They're unconstitutional. Number two,
would you include the Fed in that list?
So I am not a huge fan of the Fed. I can't look at the Constitution and the massive decades-long decisions that they have made totally undemocratic and see that is a place where there deserves to be an exception for.
I don't even understand who controls the Fed. I mean, and where does their authority come from? God? Are they speaking directly to God? Like, what is this?
No, because they're wrong, and they've been wrong.
Noticed
for decades, right?
Right. Now, let's go to zero interest rates for 11 years. See what happens.
So, President Trump hasn't run on that, and so I'm not going to speak.
But I'm just interested as you've looked into the question of what authority does the Constitution bestow into whom?
No, and to give you an example, if you go on if you were watching news, you're going to have seen in the last 2 years ads saying oppose the Fed's regulations on bank capital, right? Well, who are they supposed to call? They're not calling their congressman. Congressman has no power. The issue is like the call to action is against the Fed. Well, sorry, you're kind of out of luck.
What's the lever we would use to influence the Fed?
There is no lever, right? And so they have existed with this notion that they have this priestly ability to make decisions. And in fact, I don't actually think they're that good at it. I think people like President Trump are in fact better at it. And there's no reason that they should be exempt from the normal democratic process. And if Congress wants to come along and pass rules that says, this is how we want the money supply to go, all of that is in their purview. But I think, this is not some exception to the rule. Doesn't mean in any way that, President Trump has any interest in doing anything in this area. But I don't think it's the exception that proves the rule on independence being something that is important downstream to the CDC, the NIH. I think everything that people like Bobby Kennedy have been running on and others is about, no, you're not some priestly role. You are politicians yourselves. You just don't have to face voters, right? So independence is, I think, first and foremost. Number two, bringing back the notion of impoundment. And this is something that...
Of what?
Of impoundment. The ability to not spend money. For 200 years, presidents had the ability to not spend a congressional appropriation. That has always been the constitutional system. It had been brought. It had been a paradigm that had been brought from the UK and how we understood. The constitutional principle is certainly power of the purse means that Congress gets to set the ceiling. You can't spend without a congressional appropriation, but you weren't ever meant to be forced to spend it, and it has become a floor. So 200 years, presidents are using impoundment. They get money for something. The president says, I don't think it's a good idea, or I certainly can do it better, or I have events that are happening overseas that cause me not to want to spend on the gunboat when I want to get some treaty done. All manner of executive decision-making that would be a part of that. In the 1970s, at the lowest moment of the presidency, Congress steps in, and to some extent the courts, and they passed the Impoundment Control Act, which was really the Impoundment Elimination Act. And from that moment, they had destroyed separation of powers on spending and on fiscal issues. But it was beyond that. It wasn't just about dollars and cents. It was about control of the bureaucracy.
So that law effectively meant the executive branch, the president's agencies, have to spend every dollar they're sent by the Congress.
Correct. And I believe, as a budget guy, that was the original sin on why we can't do anything fiscally from that moment on. It's also why we get omnibus bills, because if I only need you to get your signature and I lose all of my ability to, throughout the rest of the fiscal year, to push and pull and not spend and make different decisions, I just got to get your one signature. So I'm going to put everything in that one bill,
right,
thousands of pages, and I'm going to push it through at the hardest time for you politically. You might have some diplomatic visit that you're going on.
Yeah, totally.
And so impoundment is vitally important, not just to save the country fiscally. It is vitally important to be able to wrest control of the bureaucracy, because when you combine Congress giving the agencies vast authority to interpret the laws that they passed, overly broad, make law essentially that has no repercussions on the people who voted it, right? They don't have to vote on what the right blend is for ethanol.
That's right.
And then you say that your funding is going for Congress, and the president has no ability. Sorry, Mr. President, you don't have to that's illegal. You can't turn off my funding. Now Imperial Congress still exists, just a lot more subtle. So that's number two, bringing back impoundment. Number three is dramatically going at restoring at-will employment as far as you can. A lot of ideas on the agenda, but.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.